One of the reasons I think Darden has been ranked as the #1 education business experience is the case method and the power it has to help people have a positive learning experience.
Every day we look at real business problems. Rather than learning from lectures, we learn from the past failures and successes of real companies, and there might not even be a right answer. We're expected to draw on all of our experiences to come up with what we think is the ideal solution at the end of every class.
And did you feel like you had control over that? Like at the beginning of the year, did you feel like I can get a good bonus through my efforts?
Yeah, because the way you were rewarded was very clear and transparent. They tell you, so half of that is going to come from how you interact with your clients, and the other half is going to come from how many times you get positive research results. Because a lot of the time you could just tell the client, I didn't find anything. It was a perfectly acceptable answer. So I wanted to be rewarded when I went the extra mile and actually made sure that there was nothing to be found out there.
Yeah, so big, measurable.
The case method means that you have to be on your toes. You have to be ready at all times. And that really fosters a dynamic, exciting environment rather than sitting back and waiting for a lecture to come to you.
Every one of my case discussions, and the case discussions across Darden, starts with what we call a cold call. Now, the beauty of the cold call is I randomly select a student in the room, and it could be anyone, and I ask them to take us into the business problem at hand. Now, that student might spend the first 10 to 15 minutes describing the background of the problem, potential solutions, concerns about those solutions. And knowing that you could be asked to provide that basis for the rest of our discussion is a powerful motivator to students to come prepared to class, to be truly ready to be engaged in a discussion about the topic that day.
Okay, but let's start. Wyatt, let's pick on you.
So MFS is a family of mutual funds. And what they're trying to do is figure out basically how to manage their compensation structure to maximize analyst and portfolio manager performance. MFS is a unique mutual fund in that it really values kind of a collaborative culture, and it doesn't have this.
Of the learning comes from the discussion, from the comments of the student, which may be different from class to class. So how do you make sure that they're on the same page by the end of that class? And that's where the nature of case teaching comes in. So we use the Socratic Method. So at the end of the day, I don't teach anything. I ask questions of the students. And so if I sample across the students and find that some of them are having a hard time understanding one concept or another, I'll look for a student who seems like they've mastered that concept and use them and their experience and their understanding to try and help everybody get on the same page.
But here, the structure is so different. We've talked about this 2 and 20 before. What is the 2? And what's the 20 again? Mike, what's the 2? What's the 20?
The 2 is a management fee, so that's going to be probably about double, or 30% higher than you'd see in a regular mutual fund. And the 20 is the hedge fund's share of the profits they produce, perhaps over a benchmark, perhaps not. And so that 20 doesn't exist at all in the mutual fund.
Yeah, so you think about
all the individuals who are involved in this discussion have very different backgrounds and experiences. Now, on one hand, you might think that'll make it difficult for them to have a discussion about a single topic. But most business decisions require perspectives across the spectrum. Political matters, financial matters, the community and the social implications matter. And so having different people in the room with those different perspectives, and as a faculty member understanding what those perspectives might be and who could contribute in different ways, allows us to have a much more complete discussion.
I like that. Okay, so
I think it's impossible to have case method learning that isn't influenced by the people in the class. Because the professors don't teach, and I use that term lightly, but the professors don't give you the answer. If no one had experience and no one did the work, the classroom would be silent.
One of the most important, I think, trends in global business education is understanding the importance of having a global classroom. Now, it's one thing to have classmates from other countries, other cultures. It's another thing to have them help teach you, which is exactly what the case method requires of students.
Okay, I want to talk about the characteristics of an effective bonus. Right? So, let's talk. So what was it? Give us some description. Now, you don't have to tell us dollar numbers, etc.
Well, exactly 2% and 20%.
It was 2 and 20.
I was working at hedge funds.
So. Okay, so when we think about effective, like a bonus that actually works, So, okay, so it was a 2, but why was that motivating? Why was
Well,
it 2
because
and 5?
if you didn't perform it, there was no bonus. That's it. That's pretty much how it worked.
Okay, and when you say perform, how did you get that bonus? What did you need to do?
As I told before, in Brazil, it's above the risk rate.
Yeah, yeah.
If you were above, you get 20%. That's pretty much how it works. And the portfolio manager decide how much each person in the hedge fund would get the amount of the bonus.
So when you think about that, right, so this peer
I teach
fund-
the investments and portfolio management courses in the second year, and these are both courses that are quantitatively pretty intense. And it's important to know how to use those quantitative tools, and sometimes the students have to learn those in advance. But the case setting allows you an opportunity to then apply them, to make real-world decisions. So it's one thing to do a problem set, to try and figure out how to use the quantitative tool. It's a very different thing to then say, okay, I can use it in this real-world scenario, and what kind of investment decision does it help me to make?
As opposed to a passive fund, and I want to know.
I don't think you could do first year at Darden without your learning team. They're intentionally set up so it's a diverse group of people with a diverse group of experiences, meaning there's a relative expert on every single case you look at. So beyond just having the experience of, hey, I'm going to have this person take the work over here, I'm going to take the lead here to just divide work, really it becomes the ability to bounce ideas off someone else, especially where, if you don't have experience, you can lean on your learning team member when you take the lead on the case, do your best, get yourself 90% of the way through, and they can kind of hold your hand through the rest of it. So for me, a learning team really taught me how to depend on others, how to pull from their experiences, and it was a really good way to practice telling your story and telling your answer, because if you can't explain it to the 6 people sitting in front of you, it's pretty challenging to explain it to 65 in your section.
Right, so Jay, you're telling them that MFS chooses to pay that manager as well as the growth manager?
So they did over the short run. The argument would be over the long term, you'd kind of get these cycles that may offset each other a little bit. And realistically, if your value manager...
Since the first day of class, one of the big improvements is you kind of learn how to be patient and measure yourself in the flow of the case discussion. So everyone gets in their first day and they're really eager to get in their point, think it's the most important thing, the correct answer, the right answer. And to do that, you kind of lose sight of the process. So instead, you take the chance to sit back, learn where you can add. If you have more experience, maybe you're going to sit back and say, all right, let the conversation flow a little bit, and then I can jump in and say, hey, here's what I did in my previous role. Whereas if it's a class where you might not really know what's going on, that's when you kind of learn to jump in, throw your questions out, give it a shot, because taking that chance is really how you start to learn.
If I tried to maximize this component of my bonus, it'd be hard to know how to do that, right? Because all of this becomes more and more opaque. Okay, let's see. Who we got? Yeah.
And it sounds like this whole process is very time consuming. It's time consuming on the parts of the people who are having to fill out reviews. It's time consuming on the part that are having people that are having to look at them and determine the compensation. And I think they talked about how they did compensate the people that were deciding this, but if you have a day job, this doesn't seem like a good use of people's times.
Yeah. So you think about the people who are doing it too. Who at the firm are we spending days and days evaluating these things? Is it some low-level employee?
No, it's all levels, and it seems like if you really want people to do a good job and spend time on these subjective reviews, it's asking a lot of their time. And I think people are gonna get tired of doing it, and then they stop taking it seriously, and then this 40% is somewhat, it's not as important, I think.
Yeah, so time consuming, right? Whereas this is the one industry I can think of where the measure that we care about is most clearly defined.
As a faculty member, I get real energy when students have an aha moment, when they truly understand a concept that maybe they'd studied before but hadn't quite fully grasped. And the beautiful thing about case method versus a lecture setting is they tend to have a lot more of those, partly because they're prepared, partly because they're listening to the insights and guidance from their fellow students, but largely because they're dealing with a real-world issue and trying to find a solution to that real-world issue. And when our students return for alumni weekends or for other events, they're always talking to us about how Darden prepared them for their current career. Case teaching has this benefit in that not only do you learn the actual technical skills, but you're able to voice them in a way that in a business meeting with other colleagues at your work, you can communicate your perspective clearly.
If there's one thing that defined the Darden experience for me, it's a case that everyone will remember as an alum called George's T-shirts. It's a lot of analysis, it's a lot of work, and what really stood out is the professor took 20 minutes to walk through someone's analysis that was wrong. By walking through that wrong answer, we got to see how an analysis went off the rails and how to explain the correct way of thinking and do so in a way that really brought it all together and made us all understand what was going on in that case and really tied the learning experience together.